They will tell you about backyard and how for you face so hard, but they would die before they declare, I am me born, I am me real. Stop choke your hand at me, I man.
That is straight construction.
Are you look upon me walk here?
That's the Montserratian way.
Happy show walk, yeah what happen? You never hear that from no Jamaican. This is Montserrat culture, we'll be proud of it forever.
This is Montserrat culture, we'll be proud of it forever.
English grammar you can't neglect, but hold on to it dialect. Is we ancestors give it to us, so accept the fact and stop making fuss. I am making a strong appeal, regardless what them big shots feel. Use this language more and more. Be proud of your own culture. Mommy, oh, whammy, I hear ya. You know that means surprise. Move from there, you story it. That mean you're telling lies. When me see you, Michigan, every lead drop, make we back home down. This is Montserrat culture, we'll be proud of it forever.
This is Montserrat culture, we'll be proud of it forever.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Montserrat Voices, Volcano Stories. This time we'll be looking at, Montserrat as a community, Montserrat identity, and Montserrat culture, and we'll be talking with the younger generation. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay. So for this session, it will be an opportunity for us to hear from the younger generation of Montserratians, those who were born here, those who were born in Montserrat but left really young due to the volcano, and also those who reside in Montserrat still. And we'll also explore different perspectives in terms of Montserrat identity. So what does it mean when we say that I'm Montserratian? You know, the older ones, sometimes we will say we're Montserratian, and that's because we were born there, even though we don't live there now. And for us, our Montserrat identity is stamped on our hearts, but we'll be looking, as I say, and hearing from the younger generation in terms of, well, what does it mean for them when they say that they're Montserratian, if they even see themselves as Montserratian. And there'll be opportunities as well for you as the participants to, have your input and share what you think as well in terms of some of the topics that we'll be covering. And one of the things that we're trying to really explore is the ways in which we can stay connected to Montserrat and to each other, because that is just so important. So for those who don't know me, I'm Chantal Carty. I'm one of the hosts, and my co-host is Miss Derenique Chambers. So I'll let her just quickly introduce herself, and then she will take it from here.
Good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. We are happy to have you with us again. Montserrat Voices have come again with another platform for the next generation to have their say and just look at ways that we choose to stay connected to our Montserrat heritage and know our identity as young Montserratians. So sit back, enjoy, get yourself something to drink, and let's just get ready to introduce our guest speakers this afternoon. So Chantal's already been through that. Our first speaker will be Dwanika Greaves, then followed by Royden Silcott, Shane Hogan, Curetta Farrell, Stedroy KB, and Silverine Allen. So I'm just going to give our guest speakers the opportunity to just introduce themselves to you, and then we'll get into the conversation. So,
hello everyone, my name is Dwanika and I'm based in the UK.
Thank you.
Royden.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Royden and I'm based in Montserrat.
We've got Shane.
Hi everyone, my name's Shane and I'm based in the UK.
Curetta Farrell.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Kiretta Farrell and I'm based in the UK.
Cedroy KB.
Hey, Cedroy KB here, and I am based in London.
And finally, Silverine Allen.
Hey everyone, I'm Sylvain Allen and I'm based in Birmingham, England.
Okay. Well, without further ado, let's get into our conversation and let the conversation begin. So our first speaker is Dwanika. Dwanika, would you like to take the floor? Looking at us so beautiful this evening.
Oh, thank you. So yes, good evening, everybody. Firstly, I would like to thank Chantel and Deronique for inviting me to be a guest speaker. I am very honored. So as I said before, my name is Dwanika Greaves and I'm from London in the UK. My parents were born and bred in Montserrat. My mum is a Galloway and she's from Harris's, and my dad is a Greaves, or as most Monstrantians will say, Graves, and he's from Fairfield. I too was born in Montserrat at St. John's Hospital. And my first home was in Hope Salem. And a lot of people don't really think I was born in Montserrat, and everyone initially thinks that I was born in the UK. And the reason as to this is because a week and a half after I was born, the 1997 volcanic crisis occurred. And due to this, my parents made the decision to relocate to the UK, and I have been a Londoner ever since I was 3 weeks old. But despite being brought up in London, I was always aware that I was Monstrantian. I was never confused about my connection to the island. In fact, I thought it was really cool. And this stems from the fact that going to school in Britain, most of my peers were born in Britain. So when I told them that I wasn't, I always had, and I still have to this day, interesting reactions from people. And it stemmed very educating discussions for them as I shamelessly taught them about my amazing island. From a child, I was always aware of the volcanic crisis and how it changed my life and my parents' life and my family's life. And I never felt the pressure to say, pretend I was from another, perhaps well-known island, because I was very proud, and I'm still very proud to be Monstrantian. Perhaps my affirmation of my identity stemmed from the fact that my parents always and still continues, to speak about Montserrat. I've heard so many stories about their life prior to the volcanic crisis, during it as well. And my extended family is predominantly Monstrantian, so I've always been surrounded by Monstrantian people there. And my family, as those who know me can attest to the fact that my family is very big. So a lot of Monstrantians that I've been surrounded by. My church is also predominantly Monstrantian. So as you can see, the two important community sections of my life specifically are predominantly Monstrantian. And if not Monstrantian, the close people in my life that have influenced my life are Caribbean. So in short, my social circles have a rich Caribbean influence. Connecting with Caribbean people has always been something I love, because I love the vibe of being around island people, even in the UK. I feel like it's really innate to me. And as I get older, it's just something that I feel more connected to and driven to sort of create in my social circles. And also because I was removed from the island very early in my life, it is definitely my desire to connect with Montserrat, as I do understand that being born in Montserrat and being brought up in Montserrat are two different things. But nevertheless, I'm still Monstrantian, and I may not have any conscious recollections as I was a newborn, but the experience is still encoded in my neural networks. It's still in my body. I've still embodied it in some way. Hence, the way that I plan to try and connect are, I guess first, the main thing that everybody says, but unfortunately I can't relate to, is go back to Montserrat. I haven't been yet, but this is definitely of a high importance to me, because as I said before, I want to build conscious recollections of my experiences on the island. I want to embody the island. I need to understand how present day Dwanika interacts with present day Montserrat, because I've only heard stories. Secondly, social media and virtual resources are very important. By following accounts such as, I follow 664 Connect on Instagram and Facebook. They are really good because they have a lot of content about what's going on in Montserrat now and a lot of the history as well. I think it's really good. And reading like amazing interviews that are conducted by women of Montserrat bonding, known as Room. Those are the ways in which we can see that social media can be used to help you connect across the diaspora. Thirdly, I'm an avid reader. So for me, especially in this time where we are decolonizing our literature, it's not just about me reading Black literature, you know, Caribbean literature, but also look at Montserratian literature as well, in terms of fiction and non-fiction. And lastly, I guess post the pandemic, I do hope that there are events, and I know there were prior, but I haven't actually been to especially one of the main events that occurs every year in the cultural centre. I haven't actually been to that as yet. So I do hope that, I guess, post the pandemic, there'll be new events that I can connect with other Montserratians as well, aside from, as we all know, the funerals that we always see each other at all the time, which I do love. But yeah, so just to connect in loads of different ways. So that's my little bio, I guess, in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. You said so much then. I think one of the things that stood out for me is when you say you would love to be back to Montserrat, but you would love to go back to Montserrat, but you haven't been back just yet. And I guess I just want to know, why haven't you been back? What's made you not want to go back as yet?
So I mean, I've always wanted to go back. So it's more in terms of how my life spanned out, I guess, for a massive part of my life, because I'm quite young. So, you know, I couldn't personally like take myself there, and also I've also been in the education system for a long time, so I guess when it comes to me, I've been really focused on my studies. I'm an academic, so not saying that other academics have not been able to go back, that's not the case, but with me, I guess in my life and my family situations, etc., I just haven't been able to go back. But if it wasn't, especially if it wasn't for the pandemic, I really wanted to go back this year as well. For me, it's very significant to even go back around, let's say, my birthday, because as I said, I was removed very close to my birthday. So to even go back around that time, you know, that's always like a dream for me, because it's just really, really significant, and it feels really sentimental.
Okay. And if you were able, post-pandemic, obviously, when you're able to go back, what would you like to do on the island of Montserrat?
Ooh, everything. I feel like, okay, this is one of the craziest things I actually want to do. I would love to, I know how some people can go in the helicopter and go and fly over the volcano. I would love to do that. I would love to go and see the ruins that are there as well. And then I would love to obviously just experience the normal life, eat the food that's there, connect with the young people that's there, maybe even see that the schools, the churches that are there, and just really get a whole grasp and sense and feel of the island. I want the whole experience.
Lovely. And finally, as you want so much when you go there, what does it mean to you to be a Montserratian living off island?
Ooh, for me, I think it's that whole kind of complex between, okay, you're by blood, I'm Montserratian, by, I guess, being in Britain, I'm British, Caribbean, and specifically Montserratian, but then that is still kind of different to if I was there and living this. For me, it's seeing the importance of how your pieces of culture across the diaspora are still valid, like they're still important. And for me, I know that I've been an educational resource for a lot of even people from the Caribbean who may not have even heard of Montserrat. So for me, it's actually about raising awareness and letting people know there is a beautiful island out there, and we are significant and we do amazing things. The people that come from there are so talented, and it's just about doing that in my everyday life. And everyone that I meet, just, you know, everyone gets really excited. They're like, oh, I know a Montserratian. Oh, I know somebody now that's from Montserrat. And I think that's great.
That's beautiful. That's really good. Thank you so much for that. We will come back to you, so don't go away. We'll come back to you definitely. But thank you very much for sharing with us. And coming up next, do we still have Royden? Royden, are you there? How are you doing?
Hi, everybody. I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Can you just give us a little something about what it means for you to be Montserratian living on island as well?
Okay, so as you said, I live in Montserrat and have been doing so for the greater part of my life. I was born a bit before the volcano situation, so like growing up, I understood what it was like in terms of like the island life and so on, and being exposed to a lot of different island customs, like the masquerades and the jambul and those stories with the jack-o'-lanterns and all of them other, I don't know if they're fictional or real, but you've been exposed to those stories. And I mean, coming into the Volcano era, it was like a dramatic switch in terms of what you were accustomed to, where you were accustomed to go, and you are now intertwined with a whole mass of different persons. I mean, there were Montserratians, yes, but they were from different parts of the islands that obviously possess different customs and ways of doing things. In terms of being Montserratian, I think for me, it relates more in terms of the activities that I'm involved in. Namely, I'm an architectural designer, graphic designer. So I'm able to translate a lot of our history and customs into the designs that I do, because you're designing for persons, so you have to understand how would they react to certain things, what they're accustomed to, what materials they have on the island, how to use them and all of that. So it's very important for me to observe my surroundings and understand how things work. That also translates into like the graphic design as well, because it involves using photography to some extent, and I take pride in being able to capture the island in all its glory, whether video or photography, and expose that to the world. I've lived outside Montserrat, but not for very long. The most I've lived out of Montserrat, I would say 5 years when I was at university in Jamaica. And coming from this island, persons were always fascinated with, I guess, the way you speak, the way you refer to certain things, and the fact that you have a live volcano. That's like the overshadowing element. But as a conversation starter, it's easy to now introduce them to other things about your island that is intriguing and fascinating, and things that mean a lot to you. And it kind of gains that interest that they want to come to Montserrat and experience these things. The simple thing of being in a safe place that you could leave your doors open and go down the road and come back and meet everything intact. They're fascinated by that. You don't get that every day. So like even that is a simple fact that I could say, I'm happy to be from Montserrat because we are 1,000% safe.
That's nice. That's nice. I have a question for you. I know you said you lived off island for 5 years for university, but would you consider living outside of Montserrat permanently?
I would, but to be honest, I never had to, because I never had to consider that, because a lot of persons migrate for different reasons. I'll jump back to the volcano situation. A lot of persons lost their homes and jobs and so on. So it was a means of looking for, I guess, greener pastures or just trying to survive. So I didn't have to do that because having completed secondary education, I worked for a bit, then I went to university, then I was bonded, meaning I had to basically work in Montserrat because of the scholarship agreements and all of that. So I've been living here. Like my family has property here, and I just never had to migrate. Simple. But I would consider it because I like to travel and I like to experience a lot of different things about other countries, well, especially food and, well, architecture, because some things are basic and they kind of go hand in hand. I mean, you could take things from different countries, I mean, customs, but you also have to find a way to relate it back to what's happening here. You have to use the materials that's here to basically achieve that look. So it's kind of like a problem solving challenge for me to merge cultures and customs.
Okay. So yeah, I know you're involved in a lot of things on island. You mentioned graphic designs and a range of activities that you take part in and help to organize and stuff. But what are some of the practical ways in which connections can be made between the youth on island as well as the youth off island as well? What ways can you think will make good connections between those two?
Well, I use my situation as in like real life situation. As mentioned before, we do the graphic design. I'm a part of Hypnotic, which is a media company here on Ireland. So we do photography, graphic design, we host events, sound system, all of that media related stuff. So for us, it's easy to now partner with different persons, whether you're on island or off island, because you have persons that may want to come to Montserrat for like, I guess, peak seasons or whenever, and they may want to contribute to the entertainment landscape. And I think it is important for us to be connected because it allows me to now kind of guide you as to what happens on Montserrat, where you could get resources to pull off whatever you want to pull off. And not only resources, but connections to persons and maybe venues and all of that. And it's just very important to be in contact. I mean, it goes both ways because if I do want to migrate, it would definitely be important to have somebody on ground that could guide you in terms of where to go, what to do. Yes, some persons have had to battle it in the cold, but we don't have to because there are persons that are already there. So why not just help each other out to make greater things happen?
And do you think that's something that's currently happening at the moment where we're helping each other out, those on island and those living abroad? In your
To an extent, we have been doing it, but I think greater effort needs to be put into it. It goes a lot where we need to, I guess, again, understand the environment or the situations on both sides of the fence, because it's easy for anybody to point fingers and say, oh, why you can't do this, why you can't do that. But then you need to understand that we can't do this because X, Y, Z, and Z that needs to happen to facilitate this. So we definitely need to communicate with that in that regard.
Thank you. I think I just want to pose a question to the panelists and the guest speakers and those in the audience as well. Do you think that we as a people, we rely on the government to put these things in place? And that's a question to everybody here. Do you think we rely heavily on the government to do those things for us?
Sadly, yes, I would say that in most cases, because and some things are their responsibilities, but other things it's really up to the private sector to kind of get things going. Because if you look at I guess St. Patrick's in a sense, and even the Christmas festivities, like we have I think 7-year-old event, and at the time when we started it, there was the usual slave feast and all of that, those other cultural activities that were put on by the local representatives. But then we realized that there was a gap in terms of the type of entertainment that you were exposed to. So we're like, okay, let's create this to cater for this set of persons. So it's simply that, looking at what's there and looking at how you could add to it. I mean, it only takes a start, because once you get that foundation, it's now easy for somebody else to lend you a hand rather than just staying down and expect everything to fall from above. So that's my input.
Darren.
Thank you. I think somebody's calling out my name. That's okay. Thank you so much for sharing, Royden. Avril, is there anything happening or any comments or any feedback so far?
Yes, we have one comment that has just come in, and it says, yes, the majority of us tend to rely heavily on the government to do things. However, where the help would be great, we as a people need to help ourselves first.
Nice, thank you. Thank you. Who is that from? Sorry.
And that is from Mr. What Them Good.
All right, thank you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Good, thank you. Thank you so much. Shane, Mr. Shane Hogan, you ready for me?
Yeah.
Oh, is there any more, Avril, before we move on to Shane?
Yep. This one is from Mel. To a great extent, we do rely on the government for infrastructure to make things happen, but we do need to take responsibility also.
Thank you, Meryl. Thank you for that. Shane, nice to see you on. Nice, thank you very much. I see your plant in the background, representing well. Thank you very much. Share your experience of being a Montserratian living in the UK, please.
Okay, so my name is Shane Hogan. My mom's from Weekses and my dad's from St. Peter's. Yeah, I'm 20 years old and I'm based in the UK. So to begin, I'll say that I was born in Birmingham, the UK, but then my parents moved back to Montserrat for a few years and returned to the UK. And I've lived in the UK and I've visited Montserrat twice since then, in the last 5 years actually. And that's the background of me anyway. The UK has been the main stage of my life. So that really informed my experiences. But here we go anyway. So growing up, I was very conscious that I was set apart from most of the people that I was around, like going to primary school, people from Jamaica, black people from Jamaica, and there were quite a few Asians, white people. But I was very aware that I was from this island called Montserrat. And similar to Dominica, my main circles were comprised of Montserratian people. And I very much grew up in a Montserratian household. So I grew up quite assured that I was Montserratian. But I'll say that later on in my early teenage years, that's when this tension started to emerge. And I faced like a crisis of identity, or some people might call it that anyway. But increasingly, I found myself in certain spaces, or like when I was in Montserratian circles, I was being told that I wasn't Montserratian enough, or I was too British to fit in, or to claim being Montserratian. And similarly, like in British circles around British people, particularly white people, I was too black to be with them, or to fit in that group, or too Caribbean or too Montserratian. So in my teenage years, I was going to and fro, trying to understand where I fitted into the world and what my position was in the world. And eventually, I came to the settlement that identity is such a fluid subject. It's so subjective, and ultimately, it's up to the individual to decide how they see themselves in the world. So now, rather than like, I felt as if society and like people around me were trying to tell me I had to choose, was I British or was I Montserratian? But today I can say, like, with complete assuredness, that I no longer think it's mutually exclusive. You're not one or the other. So I see myself as British and Montserratian at the same time. I think those identities can coexist, although a lot of people don't think that's the case. I think that revelation is really rooted in this idea that at the end of the day, all identities and all cultures are constantly on the move and being reproduced and recreated. Like today, we know Montserratian culture as Montserratian culture, but Montserratian culture was ultimately, Montserratian culture is like a mixture of like African influences, European influences, in the influences of like indigenous people, like things like take St. Patrick's Day, for example. A lot of Montserratians hold it, well, we celebrate St. Patrick's Day, not for the same reasons as the Irish, but it is a important day on our calendar. But where did St. Patrick's Day come from? It's rooted in our Irish inheritance, or our Irish heritage, right? But today we consider that to be just Montserratian culture. And that just shows us that the identities and cultures are always on the move and being recreated. And like, even today, I see like people like myself, people who claim Montserrat, but we live outside of Montserrat. I see this as like the latest stage of development or evolution, as in, I still claim Montserrat. I'll say I'm Montserratian, but when I say I'm Montserratian, I don't mean the same thing as my mum would, or as perhaps even other people in this on this panel. When they say they're Montserratian, it might be the food they eat. It might be the music they listen to. For another person, it might be their family. But at the end of the day, we all regard ourselves as Montserratian. So that brings me to I think the way I view identity is pretty simple. I'll just say this. Claiming to be Montserratian, when you say you're Montserratian, it can mean whatever you want it to mean or whatever you think it means. And you're not necessarily any less Montserratian or more Montserratian than anyone. You could have goat water one day a week, or you can have it once every 5 years. But regardless, the two of you are Montserratian, right? And the first panelist, Royden, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, he said like after the volcano erupted, suddenly people from the south of the island, a lot of them moved to the north. And the interesting thing is, the interesting thing there is that these people in the south saw themselves as Montserratian, and these people in the north saw themselves as Montserratian, but they probably had different customs and different practices, and they were both Montserratian, but in different ways, right? So again, I think identity is very fluid, and being Montserratian, it's not, there's no set of rules that you need to follow. It is what it means to you, and that's my piece.
Thank you. You said a lot there. You said a lot, and I feel very, I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. But I kind of just want to know, how do you stay connected to Montserrat?
How do I stay connected to Montserrat?
Yeah.
I think, like, similarly to Anika, I think those fundamental years of my life, it was dominated by people from Montserrat, right? So my family, like Anika, I've got a huge family. I'm constantly surrounded by Montserratians. Also church, a lot more Montserratians. But during that time, like, there were certain practices that were instilled in me. And I said this before, but even though I grew up in the UK, I very much grew up in a Montserratian household. So I think a lot of people get it twisted if they believe people move to England and suddenly they start treating their kids as if they've been here for 60 years. I'm sorry to disappoint you guys, but I grew up in a Montserratian household, and I'd go out on the street and be speaking to my friends, and they tell me to do things this way, and I'll be like, what? Imagine. And I think my family, my church, those people around me have been like very fundamental in that process. And it means that today I'm 20 years old and entering those the best years of my life, some say. Well, I have a lot more independence, but it means that I'm continuing with with a lot of these customs. Not all of them, I can't lie, but a lot of them. So in terms of the food I eat, the certain values I have, customs, the music I listen to, there are a lot of different factors that you see, like, Montserrat popping up in different areas of my life. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does, thank you. I know you said you visited Montserrat twice over the last 5 years, but I'll ask you the same question I asked Royden, because I got the perspective of someone living on island. It would just be nice to know the opinion of someone living off island. What are some of the practical ways in which connections can be made between the youth on island and those living abroad, such as America and the UK, for example?
That's a very Interesting question. I can only speak from my position and my experiences. I think the times I have been to Montserrat, for example, during St. Patrick's, that was the first time, and then after that, it was during the summer. I think while I was there, it was more about seeing family or spending time with family. I wasn't going out of my way to, or I didn't have an opportunity to make those links. And during the St. Patrick's Festival, it was very much about enjoying St. Patrick's. And then in the summer, it was about just relaxing, but also a lot of people weren't actually there during the summer, which I didn't know until I got there. But things were quite quiet. But I think to do that, whoever chooses to take the lead on that, they need to be very intentional. And I don't think it's enough to say everyone come for St. Patrick's Day, St. Patrick's Festival, or everyone come for Christmas, or everyone come for a week in the summer or a few weeks in the summer. It would be good if someone put together a program where people actually will interact and build those bonds, because I think otherwise, if you leave it to individual discretion, you won't make those bonds that you want to see anyway. So I think it takes like a intentional approach.
I think that's fair. I think your response is similar to what Royden was saying, between making a connection between those in Montserrat and those living abroad, no matter where it is, and just putting those things together. Because as you said, you went down for St. Patrick's, then it seemed like everybody was there for St. Patrick's. I think it was the same for Christmas time as well. But when you go down for the summer holidays, for example, it seems like there's barely anybody on island because it don't seem like there's anything to do. But if things are put in place, and whoever the organizers are in Montserrat, if that can be in place in America, in the UK, wherever Montserratians are based around the world, I think that will be a good connection. So I definitely agree with you there. I have one final question for you. Would you consider living in Montserrat permanently?
My answer is it's not off the cards. I think the way I like to view the world, I could, like, in the next 5 years, perhaps I'll be in Montserrat, but I could also be living in Barbados or the United States or France. I don't like the idea of just confining myself to it's either the UK or Montserrat. I think while it's an option, it's always an option to go back to Montserrat. It's not something that is set in stone or something essential.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Chantal, do you want
Veronique, we do have one question for Shane.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's coming in from Mel. Shane, are there any aspects of Montserrat culture that you would have difficulty in identifying with?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question. That's the thing. Well, thanks for that question, Miro. The thing is, I think I can interact and identify with a lot of elements of Montserratian culture because my upbringing was very much Montserratian. Like, I grew up in a Montserratian household. I'm not saying it was exactly the same because, of course, the other influences being in Britain, but I can identify with a lot of different elements, most elements, in fact. But I think it's really the real issue is that I've been in a number of situations or scenarios where, for example, I might be enjoying, we started with some Arrow, right? Arrow was playing in the background. I can remember times where I've been singing along and someone will say to me, but are you really Montserratian though? Or if I'm talking, if I'm joining a conversation with a group of people who are born in Montserrat, maybe even raised in Montserrat, then like automatically my input's discounted because I wasn't born in Montserrat, and I can't switch to dialect like this. And so I do think I can identify with these different elements of Montserratian culture, but I think some people take issue. I think me doing that makes some people feel uncomfortable, but I think that's really, I feel like they're uncomfortable with this, like this sort of like hybridity that I possess, like between being British and Montserratian. Like I think I can be these things at the same time, and it's not I'm one or the other. But some people think I have to either conform entirely to being Montserratian, or if you don't do that, then you're British. You're not of us. You're not part of us. Hopefully that answers your question, Miro.
I think, Meryl, do you want to respond to him?
No, I was just putting my thumbs up and saying that I really appreciate the answer he gave. And I understand and I identify what he's saying. I do understand what he's saying. It was there. That's very informative.
I agree, definitely agree with that. Shane, I just wanted to piggyback off what the last thing you just said, where it's you're either with us or you're against us kind of thing. Well, not really against, but you're either a part of us or you're something else. And I liked what you said earlier about being both British and being both Montserratian at the same time, and why does it have to be either or? Do you think that there are some Montserratians, the youth that live on island, that don't think the Montserratians living abroad are true Montserratians? And I put that in quote marks. Would you think some people have that notion?
Personally, I don't have specific examples, but I've heard different stories. For example, a friend of mine, after everyone left the island after St. Patrick's the festival, someone put on social media, "Oh, finally, these foreigners have left my island." And hearing that, it's quite disheartening. But I think it's rooted in like ignorance, and I don't blame anyone, but I can't like name whose fault it is. But I think a lot of people think you go to England and it means I'm sitting down with the Queen and having tea, or like every day I'm using like red telephone boxes. I think only if they knew, like in reality, in England, like a lot of people do not want to accept, but I'm British either, because to them I'm too Montserratian, I'm too Caribbean. So yeah, unfortunately, I think it is true. A lot of young Montserratians might see like that. Stedra, I see you. It's no one's fault, but I think it would be worth like not educating, but letting them know that we're out there and we exist. We are still Montserratian, and we're very much raised in Montserratian circles, etc.
Thank you very much for that.
Dee, just 1 second. Any of the other guest speakers want to comment on that question as well?
I can see
you all on the spot.
Sorry, I missed the question. What was the question?
I'll repeat it. So the question was, do you think that the Montserratians living on island don't think Montserratians living off island are true Montserratians? Or do you think that we're the watered down version?
I think it might be a view of some people. And I guess it's personal perspective. I don't necessarily think it's true, because as Shane said, what makes you Montserratian is kind of personal to you. And I guess, you know, it can be, I think a lot of the times it's sometimes used as banter. You know, it's not really like a serious thing. Even that tweet or that comment where it says, "Thank God the foreigners have left." You know, I've heard that many times, but I think it's just a lot of it is banter and not actually a serious thing. But yeah, I think, yeah, some people do think that way and some people don't. It's you know, it's just a matter of human mindset. And so Shane said, you know,
Curetta,
Can I come in? Yeah, I think there's also a generational kind of dimension to it. So I think, for example, with my parents, because there are people on the island who I guess know them, grew up with them, are familiar with them in terms of pre-volcano. I think for them, they wouldn't necessarily be seen as a diluted kind of Montserratian because they were born and bred in Montserrat. They have that there's that proximity and experience for them. But then I think for like my generation, and maybe not necessarily for me because I've spent so much time in Montserrat and because I go back so frequently, but for other folks who don't have those experiences, I think then for some on island, they're seen as kind of diluted if they're not aware of who they're related to, what the connection is. If there isn't those kind of clear ties, then I think sometimes there is that kind of, maybe they're diluted, maybe they're not really Montserratian kind of perspective comes in. And I don't think personally that should be the case, but I think there is a kind of generational kind of age and experience dimension to that comment.
Thank you very much for that, Curetta. I'm very interested to hear your perspective on things going forward, so look forward to your segment. Before I bring you in, Chantal, I did want to bring the question back to Royden. Meryl asked Shane a question about what things he struggles to identify with. Well, I kind of just want to flip the question a little bit for Royden. What is your favorite aspect of Montserratian culture that you identify with, Royden?
I would guess I'd say food, in a sense, because I mean, other islands prepare dishes similar to what we prepare. For example, like goat water and so on, but then they would add different ingredients that we're not accustomed to. So it's always good to like make that differentiation as to how we do it and maybe why we do it that way. Some people just simply add stuff because that's what they're accustomed to do. They're accustomed to make soup and they're gonna add dumpling and everything else that they think should be in the soup. So like for us, it's probably more significant in terms of how our ancestors did it, or maybe what was available at the time as well. So not only goat water, but I guess dampener. Some people may add raisins. Some people may use foil to boil it rather than getting that chainy bush and going through the whole process. So for us, we look at the whole process. It's not just arriving at the product, it's like the whole process that it takes to get that product. So going to the bush is part of the process. We take pride in that, collecting it, doing the little ties and boiling it on outside stove or something like that. I mean, some people have a problem with goat water that's boiled on a stove as opposed to a outdoor stone fire. So yeah, I would say food is what I used to do, what I like to use sometimes to differentiate myself.
Thank you. I think Shane wanted to just add something to his previous answer, and then I will hand the next section over to Chantal. Shane?
Yeah, really quickly, I sat back and I was thinking about my response to Miro, and I think I did miss something. My answer was a bit misleading. And being completely honest, I can't identify with a lot of the actual on-island experience. So that like already like puts up like a barrier between me and some of the young people on the island, because I simply can't relate to how they grew up, or like, for example, secondary school in Montserrat is probably very different from secondary school in the UK, or simple tasks like, as Royden was saying, like going to a bush. I have a holiday, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same experience. And also I'll say also I can't identify with a lot of the stories I hear my parents saying, or like my parents' generation, people older than me, about Montserrat before Volcano, because when I go back, I can't imagine or even fathom what Montserrat was like before. And like Kiretta was saying, like there's a big generational divide there. Because, well, I should say again, one side of the family are from the south of Ireland. So when we're talking about it, and even when I go back to Montserrat, I'll never get to experience that. Neither will my cousins or any of us who go back. And then again, even when we go to the north, we can't relate with the people exactly. We can relate on certain things, but we can't relate exactly because we had different experiences, and that's just the fact of life. And like, even in the UK, in Britain, perhaps I can relate to the experiences of my friend who's from Afghanistan or Nigeria in a certain way, because we both grew up in Britain. But then someone I know in Montserrat, we don't have those experiences, those common experiences that hold us together, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to clear that up and correct that.
Thank you very much for that, Shane. Avril, anything in the comments before I hand over to Chantal?
Yes, just a comment from Mel. She said, the sad thing is that the older generation living in the diaspora get accused of being the ones who ran away, but some of the Montserratians on Ireland and the young ones born off Ireland get labelled as being Montserratian.
Thank you for that. I think there's somebody with their hand up, Jean Farrell. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Jean Farrell, are you there? I may be saying the name incorrectly. Okay.
Hi, good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Hi. My name's Janice. I was born on Montserrat, but moved to the UK when I was about 13. And it was touching on what everyone said about how, because when I first came here, the culture was completely different to what it was back home in Montserrat, and adapting to a British culture was very difficult for me. It meant like I had to forget my cultural roots of Montserrat, and I sort of adapted to what the UK culture would have been. And touching on what Shane said and what Royden has said as well, I guess sometimes that we should be able to link both cultures together, whether we are from an island or from a UK citizen, should be able to link both cultures together, and we shouldn't have to differentiate between a Montserrat culture or an English culture. We should all be able to work. We should be able to put both cultures together, but also a lot of times when I say to people, oh, I'm from Montserrat, and when I do switch from my English language to my dialect, they're like, oh, you're a fake Montserratian. I was like, no, I'm not. I was born there, but like being in a UK culture, speaking the dialect, a lot of people don't understand what you were saying. So you have to quite quickly pick up on the English language, and you have to follow through that for life, sort of thing. So I just wanted to touch on that and just say that it doesn't matter what culture you come from, you just have to be able to say, okay, this is where I'm born, these are my roots, but then I also have other roots I need to adapt to as well, sort of thing.
Thank you very much for sharing. We appreciate it a lot. Chantal?
Okay, thank you. So a couple of things I wanted to pick up on, and the first one was what Kiretta was saying about the connection and the recognition in terms of, for example, those who were born there and left and people know them, and then when even if you were born there and you go back in, and because people can't connect the dots, sometimes they then question your Montserratness, if there's such a word. I heard it and I keep using it, but that's sometimes, because I feel that that's part of our culture actually, the fact that we tend to know a lot of each other. So the fact that I can't place you, are you really Montserratian because I'm supposed to know somebody for you, or and sometimes that's where it can be a thing. The other thing is the language. That's part of our culture, the way how we speak and so on. And the issue of coming to some place like Britain, and as I think as Gina's just said, you have to tailor your tongue to be properly understood, especially if you're in workplaces and things like that. So by default, you tend to lose a bit of your Montserrat twang, not because you want to, but in a way you have to adapt to be real, to be understood. And that can sometimes lead to that question of, oh, are you even really that Montserratian because you're not talking and saying the things in the way that we say them? Just a quick question, and Mel, I'm kind of giving you a heads up here on this one because we had a conversation and we were talking about Montserrat language because that's part of our culture, and there were some things that we say as Montserratian, you know, that would just, from you open your mouth and you make certain statements, people were like, oh, he come from Montserrat, you know what I mean? They just know straight, you have to come from Montserrat because only Montserrat people might say those things. Anybody can think of anything that you think when you hear that, you're like, we believe he come from Montserrat. Anybody? And Merle is laughing away. If she can even hear me properly, that we did have this conversation. Anybody else in terms of things that we might be, that we might say that we feel that's unique to us in terms of our language?
Well, yeah, one thing one thing I learned this week was that some Montserratians call tomato tomati. This week was like the first week I heard it, and like I really didn't believe my parents when they were telling me that, so I had to phone my grandmother in Montserrat I was calling around to people just to confirm that that's the way that people pronounce tomato. So that was something new I learned this week.
Definitely. Anybody else want to come in with anything that, you know, or you think it might, you know, when you think of Montserratian language?
You know what? Going off what Coretta just said, so yesterday I was cleaning some chicken SME and stuff for Sunday dinner today and seasoning them, and then I was using what is known as thyme, and in my head I was saying obs because that's, you know, that's the thing we say back home is obs. I was like, oh my gosh, is that actual word? Like, do other Caribbean people or people in general say obs? I think it's a Montserrat thing. And then I'm thinking, I was gonna tweet something about it, but I'm like, people are not gonna know what I mean when I say obs. I'd have to say time. So yeah, I think that's another Montserrat thing, obs.
Yeah.
I mean, your food
Definitely.
don't taste good without obs. So
yeah.
Can I just say something? I lived in Antigua for about 7 years before coming to England. And one day I used to catch the bus. And I was sitting, you know, in Antigua, you sit in the bus station and you wait for the bus to fill up and then the driver goes. So I had gotten there early and I was sitting in the front seat talking to the driver. And I saw a Montserrat person that I knew pass. So I was like, hey. And they stopped and I leaned out, you know, my side of the bus and was talking to them. And then, you know, we spoke for a few minutes and they left. And the driver turned to me, the Antiguan driver turned to me and he said, I didn't realize you come from Montserrat. I know you're not from Antigua, but I could never pinpoint where you were from until when you talked just now. So I said, what do you mean I talk to you all the time? He said, no, it's not how you talk. It's something you say only Montserratians to say it. And I was like, what do you mean only Montserrat? What is it that only Montserratians said? And you know what he said? Me no. He said, I've been driving bus for years in Antigua. And I drive Jamaicans, Vincentian, I drive everybody. And the only people I hear that say, me no, is the Montserratian. And as soon as I heard you say it just now, I said, bam, she from Montserrat. And all the years I'd been saying that, I never thought of it as Montserratian. So it's those little things that are just unique to us that we do automatically. You see, Steroid just automatically said herbs because it's just so ingrained in you. So certain things come out automatically and then you have to stop yourself.
Thanks for sharing that, Mel. I thought it was worth everybody hearing that story. Me no. Montserratian-ness. Avril, do you want to read that comment from Dion in the chat before we move on, please? Thanks.
Yeah, Dion says, I am confident in my Montserratness, that I allow no one to question me. I can't, especially living in USA. And Corinne did say Christophine. That's a good one.
Good. And I want to pick up on what Dion is saying, 100%. You know, we have to own our Montserrat identity, whatever that identity is. As Shane was saying, it's going to be fluid, especially with migration and things like that. That identity is going to be fluid. certain things we're going to hold, and you know what I mean, certain things are going to evolve. But especially for those, you know, younger people who might not be born there, but your parents or your heritage is from there, it's very important that we hold on to some aspects of our Montserrat heritage and culture, 100%. So I definitely agree with that. So we're going to move on in the conversation, and we're going to do a poll shortly. But first, I just want to read the statement and then we can pick it up from there. And so you can see, so the statement says, it's a shame that young Montserratians are not able to connect and build relationships with each other, with other young Montserratians outside of their family circle or church circle in the same way that the older generation was able to do whilst growing up on island and going to school together. Now, just to build on that statement, when you think about it, a lot of those who are born on island, they built these relationships naturally. You know, if I'm friends with, I can't even think, Merle. If I'm friends with Merle, naturally my children and Merle's children will build that relationship because we're going to be hanging together, we're going to be socializing together, and so on. Yeah. So these relationships are going to build naturally within school, within relationships and stuff. Now, the poll question that we're going to pose shortly is, do you think there is any value in the younger generation of Montserratians networking? Because when you think about it, the older ones already have these relationships, whether they live in America, they live in England, regardless to where they live, they've already formed these relationships. Do we think that there's any value in the younger generation of Montserratians networking? So for example, Royden and Donika, two different sides, you know, paths probably would not have crossed, and they've crossed tonight, for example. You know, is there any value in potentially building relationships and networking? So that's the poll question. Av, can you pose the poll question, please? So anybody want to kind of share their answer or want to elaborate on the answer that they've given in the poll? We'll share the results of the poll in a minute, but just to elaborate, I think, Donika, you wanted to come in?
Yes, I think it's really interesting that you use that example as well of, say, me and Royden, because I was really thinking about, yes, there is value, and especially in the sense of connecting very specifically, even across fields as well. I think it's very healthy in the sense that, you know, we live in an era where, to start as Black people around the world, we are trying to connect. Like, I've been in a period in my life where academically I've connected with a lot of people from America, from Canada, and even in the UK as well, regarding like my field and what I study. And we're trying to see each other in the field and see what we're doing, because obviously the cultures we live in, due to colonialization, etc., have put a quiet on the voices of Black people. And then as Caribbeans, let's say, for example, in the UK, our voices are quite even more, and this is according to statistics and stuff like that, in terms of compared to, for example, British Africans, etc. And then as Montserratians, then because we come from a smaller island, I feel like if you are passionate about your island, if you are passionate about where you're from, and you don't connect the younger generation, and you're already a minority of the minority, you're basically going to wipe yourself out. and it sounds very drastic, but it's true. So I do think that there's value in terms of course, building your social circles across people who share that common ground of being from Montserrat in whatever way specific to them. But also, as I said before, I think it's just really healthy. And I think for the fields that you're in, especially say the creative field as well, because I'm also a creative, it's just really healthy to gain inspiration across that. And I like what, I can't remember who said it, what someone said about the connections that were made before were actually organic. And I guess now when we make these platforms for people to connect, it is less organic, but I feel like you can create something organic out of something that might not be that organic in the beginning. You can create long-lasting, strong relationships. Yes, even if some may start professionally, they can block, because I've literally experienced this, but with people from other islands as well. Like, what started off professionally, literally by the next time I was talking to them again, even virtually, it just spanned off into something even more closer. And I think I think there is a beauty and there definitely is an importance of doing that.
Thank you so much. Anybody else want to vocalize their thoughts in terms of why you said yes or no?
I said yes as well because it's very important going forward in the island's development, because to me, I think we're at a pivotal point where there's a lot of room to shape a lot of the development. And yes, you have persons living here, yes, you have persons living in other countries, but I think all of our voices combined would be definitely loud and be able to carve a lot of, I guess, new history, because yes, we appreciate what has happened in the past, but I think as a people, we need to begin to start adding to the history. I mean, yes, we have masquerades, we have all of these things, but we need to begin to start adding, because I guess like 2 or 3 generations down, there's gonna be a gap, like what happened in this gap? What happened after they had Goatwater and masquerades? What happened in between that spot? We can't just say we had volcano. So we need to have that input. We need to start creating new, like, physical landmarks. Going forward in tourism, we keep saying Berry City. We're not saying statue of Arrow. We're not saying statue of somebody else. You know, there's no new fascination. So we need to come together and create that new fascination going forward for our island's development.
Great, 100% agree with that. 100% agree with that. We have to be forward thinking and looking at where we are now as a people. And I like to use that word, as a people, because as Danica said, you know, we're already the minority in a minority. And some people say, oh, you know, why are we having these Montserrat focused conversations? Because we need to. Yes, we're part of the Black British Caribbean, we're part of all these other groups, but guess what? We are this group as well. And we need to have our own conversations and look at our own issues so that we can move forward as a people, because we are a people, 100%. Listen, I don't even want to get carried away now. But 100%. Any comments? Anybody else want to add before we move on? Because our next speaker is going to be Kiretta. So any comments?
Sorry, just to touch on what you said, Chantal, I think I did say yes, I did vote for yes in that poll. And I think it's important because, like, for any of us that's on the panel that's going to be having like nieces or children going forward, we're going to need to teach them about our culture. They're going to say, oh, mommy, where are you from? I'll be like, I'm from Montserrat, but I've never heard of that place before. So it's always good to sort of have that connection and take it going forward towards future children, towards future nieces, grandchildren, and all that. So just so we keep our culture going, keep our culture alive, as I would say, and just keep going, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. Like even today, I had a conversation with my eldest, and I was like, "Listen, we're having a Caribbean Christmas this year. We have a Caribbean Christmas every year, but I was like, we're having a Caribbean Christmas." And I said to her, "What makes a Caribbean Christmas?" And then she said sorrel. I was like, yes. And then she said something else. I was like, yes. But she forgot the rum cake. I was like, how can you forget the rum cake? But it's these little conversations that I have to kind of embed it in their brain, so that when I'm grey, when they're the adult with their children, they know they need to be making these things, because these are things I'm going to want to eat when I can't make it myself, you know. So definitely trying to instill the culture and the traditions and things like that. Anything, Avril, before we bring Kiretta in, please?
Yeah, we have a comment from a room who said, Breen Brown said, we should see connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship.
100%, 100%. There's so much coming out of these sessions today. It's brilliant. So thank you, everyone. We'll come back to that again, and you know, more opportunities for everybody to come in. But at this time, I'm going to ask Kiretta to speak and to share with us.
Thank you, Chantal. So good evening, everyone. I'm Curetta Farrell. I was born in Montserrat, but I moved to the UK when I was 2 years old. My dad is Keithley Farrell from Corkhill, and my mom is Coretta Farrell, formerly Braid from Harris's. So growing up, Montserrat has always kind of been that foundation in family life, in the way I was raised, the way I was brought up. I remember when we first came to the UK in that short period, maybe the 5 or so years after we moved here. And I remember my dad was one of the people who would often go and pick up people from the airport who were just coming into England and bringing them back to Birmingham. And I remember kind of doing those journeys with him. I remember my parents also doing a lot to help people kind of get in the system and getting their children into the primary school that I was going into. So being a Montserratian and that community's always kind of been that kind of permanent feature of my life. And I think growing up, the music that was played, the food that we ate has always been Montserratian. But then I guess I went through a similar identity crisis, maybe not to that extreme, but I can definitely relate to some of what Shane was saying. And I think that happened during the university, when I was attending university. And I remember going and I think I never, although Montserrat was that permanent feature, I never really thought of it as being unique to Montserrat necessarily. I just thought, oh, it was kind of like Black, Caribbean. It was a feature of kind of just Black culture and Black communities, no matter where they're from. I think when I went to uni and I joined like the African and Caribbean Society, and then I realized that there was like this Nigerian community, and there's this Ghanaian community, and there was East African, and there was this and that, and it kind of threw me a little bit, because I was like, okay, what is Montserrat? Because they're coming with all their cultures and their traditions, like weddings, traditional weddings, the outfits, and they know the significance behind a lot of their traditions. And I was thinking, so what's Montserrat? Like what's what's the equivalent? So I think that kind of threw me into this spiral of wanting to learn a lot more about our culture, the meanings and the significance behind things. Yes, St. Patrick's is great for understanding why we're celebrating St. Patrick's and the meanings behind all of the different aspects of the social calendar. For Montserrat, so I took a lot of time kind of doing that. And then kind of during the period that I was studying, I went to Montserrat for a year and I lived down there. This was 2016 to 2017, and I lived and worked down there for just under a year. And I think that was really eye-opening, because throughout my life, I'd gone back to Montserrat for holiday, spent a few summers there with my grandmother, just quite a frequent visitor. So I thought, oh, well, I understand what life is like and about, because I go back there often. And I think that year really opened my eyes as to what the reality of life was and how British I was. Simple things like, I remember my grandmother giving me a bowl of peas to shell, and I went to grab a knife and she burst out laughing. Or like bush tea, and she told me to go down to the back of the house and pick some soursop bush. So I picked some bush that I thought was soursop bush, and I put them on in the pot. I boiled the pot, started drinking, and she came into the kitchen and she was like, "What? What's that?" It wasn't soursop bush. Don't know what bush. It was just some random leaf that I picked off a tree. But just those little things that I wouldn't have experienced if I hadn't lived down there necessarily. But I think it just kind of taught me a lot about life in Montserrat, what it means to kind of live down there, and how it gave me that, because I know we were talking about experiences earlier, and having those on-island experiences and how those can really like stick with you and really reinforce your identity. And I think that provided an opportunity to get some of those real kind of on-island experiences because it wasn't something I was necessarily afforded previously. So some of the stories that my mom and my dad would tell me growing up, I began to relate to them, having that kind of opportunity to live down there. Maybe not all of them I'm able to relate to simply because life down there is not how it was 25 years ago. The whole nature of the island has changed. But just even having those little experiences kind of gives me that more solid connection to the island, which I'm extremely, extremely grateful for. But then I remember once I left Montserrat, after that year had ended, I went to America to study for a year. And I remember when people would ask me, oh, like, tell me a bit about yourself, I would say that I was Montserratian, especially coming fresh from Montserrat. I really felt really strong in my Montserratian identity, and my accent would just give me away because everyone would be like, you're not Montserratian, you're British. But I was so kind of strong that no, I'm not, I'm Montserratian. There was kind of that tension for some people, but for me, I think that was when I really began to really understand what being Montserratian meant. Because for me, it's the food, and yes, it's the music, and it's the culture and the social calendar and what we celebrate, how we celebrate it. But I think it's also the values. So how I was raised in terms of the values about community, about respect, about being neighborly, about togetherness, supporting people in need. Those values are what shape my kind of everyday activity, how the kind of career I've chosen, those kinds of things. To me, that's what being Montserratian is really about. So yeah, that concludes, I guess, my short introduction. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much, Kiretta. And I'm glad that you mentioned the fact that you were living there for a bit, because I thought that was one of the reasons why I really wanted you to be on this one of the speakers, because you have the experiences of being here, living here, growing up here, and going to Montserrat for a longer period of time, because a lot of people go to Montserrat for the week or two or whatever, and they feel that they get the full, real Montserrat experience. And as you say, it's a different thing when you go down for 6 months, 7 months, a year, and so on. So 100%. So question to you is, do you feel that there's a strong Montserrat connection in the diaspora? In terms of like Montserrat community, then let me rephrase that.
I think there was definitely coming from when everyone kind of moved late 90s, early 2000s. I think the community was really strong there because there was quite a bit of associations as well that were putting on events, supporting people to really kind of acclimatize to the way of living in the UK. I remember going to events regularly in Birmingham, growing up, not wanting to go to the events at the time, but really looking back, really appreciating those events. And then I think those associations dwindled and a lot of activity dwindled. And then outside of perhaps church and a few odd things that were happening, like Miss Montserrat UK, there's been a few things that have happened over the last kind of maybe 15 years. I don't think there is such a strong sense of community as there was, but I do think it's beginning to pick up, because I know that there are funerals, and I think we joke and we banter about the funerals and the size of the crowds at the funerals, but outside of that, I can't really necessarily think of any activities where we really come together like that community, that big community, should I say. I think there are pockets of communities and smaller social circles, but that one big kind of Montserratian UK community, I don't necessarily think is as strong as it previously was. But I do think there are folks right now who are making an effort to really bring people together and to really build things, which I'm really excited to see, and really want to support that kind of activity.
100%. And that's the thing. It's like it's not what it used to be, but we can see in some ways that it is picking up. You have different, groups and organizations that are kind of trying to pull people together and, getting us to move forward and stuff. And I guess all we have to do, especially if we're not the ones who are driving or the organizers of things and so on, is just give that support. That sometimes that's all we have to do, is give that support, show up and help to strengthen the community bonds and so on. So thank you for that. My other question to you is in terms of the practical ways, because obviously being on Ireland, living there for a while, you built relationships with people you never knew before and so on. What are some of the practical ways you think would be, practical ways that you can actually connect the youth on Ireland and those that are living abroad?
Yeah. So one of the things that I really champion is spending time in Montserrat for young people, spending longer than that kind of holiday period. If you can kind of go down there for a longer period, especially now that we're in the pandemic and islands are now opening up their borders for folks to come in and work there remotely. Thinking about maybe seizing some of those opportunities if you can, if you're in a position to pick it up and to spend some time in Montserrat to really really learn about what life is like down there. But I think outside of that, I think connecting professionally is, as was said, is a good way to do it as well. And I think maybe linking the groups, because I think right now we're doing so many things virtually. I think it might be an opportunity to link like youth groups on Ireland and over here together. We have so many church groups that are quite active here, maybe thinking about holding like joint youth meetings or even just youth associations, or if anyone has any projects that they're working on in a particular field and that there's someone in the diaspora, or vice versa, if you're in the diaspora and there's someone on the island, or if you don't know, speak to people about what you're doing, because there's bound to be someone who has a mutual interest in the work that you're doing, and thinking about bringing them in and working and collaborating, I think, is another way that we can really build some of those networks.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. Anybody? Thanks, Kiretta. Appreciate it. I have no more questions coming at you at this moment. Avril, anything in the chat that you want to bring in? And if anybody wants to comment or have a question for Kiretta or something, now's your opportunity.
Yeah, a few comments from Nick. The older generation, from the time they hear a name of a person they can relate to, knowing them, the younger generation can't. Networking will help in this area. Desi said, even though that these speakers would say that their parents are from a particular village, it would be lovely if they are told where in the village they are originally from, like Cudgerhead, Spring and so on, or from Harris's village and so on. And Merle has said, good point, Coretta, about the pockets of communities. That might be a starting point for the pockets to join together on a regular basis. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. So if nobody wants to come in with anything, we're going to call on Mr. Stedroy KB to put his 2 cents into the ring.
Evening, everyone. Again, if you're tuning in late, I'm Stedroy KB. Everyone calls me Sted or Steady, either way. So I was born on Montserrat. Well, my mom is Maureen KB Lee. That's Maureen, everyone calls her. My dad, Stedroy Drewbury, better known as Inches, who's now deceased, from Stratham's, and then my mom's from Long Ground. So I grew up on Montserrat. So I feel like I've had like the best of both worlds so far. So I'm on the flip side of Coretta, actually. So Coretta, I guess, came here when she was younger and then moved back for a bit or whatever. But I grew up in Montserrat. So I left Montserrat when I was like 17. Came to the big UK for, to continue life and continue education. So I grew up with that strong sense of Montserrat culture and what that means, and being a part of the community in Montserrat, like having strong roots and connections back home, and then coming here and building or continuing that, you know, connecting with people here, making new friends and connections here as well. In terms of what I guess makes one Montserratian, I think as Shane had said, you know, I think it means something different for everyone. For me, I think knowing, because I did like Montserrat Caribbean history and stuff, and I have that, you know, within me and stuff. I think it's just knowing how we differ from different islands, what makes Montserrat unique, knowing our history, knowing our national bird, knowing our national dish, knowing our heroes, knowing our language, which is definitely a major part of being Montserratian and identifying with that culture and that heritage, and just holding on to and learning, actually, you know, if you feel like you don't know enough, just being open to learn. And I think a good way to probably gauge is think to yourself, can I confidently speak to someone who knows nothing about Montserrat and articulate what Montserrat is, where Montserrat is, you know, what's happened, what is happening, current events, past events, you know, stuff like that. And I think for me, I've definitely held on to my Montserrat roots. You may not hear it, but definitely, I think like many others, when you came, you know, you kind of had to switch things up a little bit so people can understand you better. I remember like when I was in college, because I came 17 and then went straight into college, you know, I had to repeat myself a lot. So it was like, what you say, can you say that again? So, you know, like over time, things kind of switched up a bit. And I do get the comments of, I think I was speaking to one of my like actor friends in the States or something, and I was saying to him, oh yeah, like I grew up in Montserrat. He's like, you sound British, I can't hear it. And he's like, say something in Montserratian. I'm like, bro, what do you want me to say? So I start trying, you know, not trying, I start, you know, saying things in Montserratian. He's like, yeah, you're just putting that on, whatever. I'm like, no, bro, like, you know, I'm from Montserrat. So you do get those comments and stuff, but I think because I'm so confident and so secure in my Montserratianness, as Dion put it, shout out to Dion, that I don't actually get offended or wavered by those comments, because I know, you know, my connections are strong. My connections are definitely deep rooted. If I go to Montserrat, like it's probably a bit different now because there's a lot of different people who came after I've left. But a lot of the people there, I still know them. There's still connections, you know. You hail people on the road, steady, you know, steady, how things going, whatever, welcome home, you know, and that makes me feel good. And, you know, that there's the connection there. And I think, you know what, when Shane was saying, and I think Coretta, there was, and Doinika, I guess some sense of, I don't want to say identity crisis because it's not. It's more of a questioning of the Montserratianness. And I think now, because of the world that we're living and because of all the things that Montserrat has gone through, our culture has somewhat broadened. And if you can think of it, there might be subcultures within our Montserrat culture. So you have the UK experience, you have the US experience, you have the other people within the Caribbean, you know, because we've all dispersed everywhere. So that culture, or what we call the Montserrat culture, has to me broadened, because it's not only born on Montserrat, grew up on Montserrat, according, you know, Roy then mentioned Goatwater and masquerades and Michael John be like, you know, all of that stuff. It's not only knowing that, but because of what we've gone through and the experiences we've had, there's a difference within. So it means something different to each person. And Rawdon kept mentioning Goldwater, and I think he's probably hungry, and he's, you know, trying to make me hungry now, saying that all the time. But yeah, so, you know, like for me, like I'm very much, my Montserrat culture and my Montserratness is ingrained in me, and everyone, literally everyone I speak to, the first thing one of the first things I kind of say, you know, I'm from Montserrat, and they're like, if they say, where's that? Great, give me the opportunity. I start spilling like, yeah, there's, you know, our connection to Britain, our connection to the Irish, you know, our festivals, you know, what's going on, like, you know, and then people find it quite interesting because I just like talking about Montserrat. And, you know, so staying connected for me, you know, I stay connected with people back home. People here, like, you know, my church is very much predominantly Montserratian. You know, like Dominica, we go to the same church. And, you know, my friends and stuff here, and I still stay connected. And I make sure that I'm intentional about it. I think we have to be intentional about our connections as well, and wanting to learn about our culture and wanting to hold on to that and want to pass that to our children. Well, I don't have any kids yet that I know of, but passing that to our children and our nieces and our nephews, and, you know, just keeping that culture alive, because, you know, as the older generation, you know, go on to glory, as we say, we have to continue that, and we have to make sure that's secure. And again, I think it just goes back to knowing our history and the foundations and the roots of Montserrat. And yeah, that's for me, that's my connection. That's what makes me Montserratian, and that's how I stay connected and stay rooted. And going back, like I go back quite often as well. People keep getting married, so I'm there often. So that's one thing. And, you know, like go back for like celebrations and just like an escape. And it's interesting as well, everyone's mentioned St. Patrick's. I remember obviously growing up in Montserrat, the flip side of that, I know what it was like having people come to Montserrat. And for me, like growing up, it was more Christmas. Christmas was the main thing then. So you used to look forward to that, people coming home for Christmas, and the vibe and the atmosphere was different. But now, as I'm a bit older, I'm not that old, I'm only 30, but it's more of a St. Patrick's thing now. And, you know, like me going from the UK to celebrate St. Patrick's is a flip side for me. So it's a different thing. But yeah, I think I can talk about Montserrat and my connection all night. So I won't go on a bit more. That's me
Okay.
and my connections.
All right, thank you. Before I come back to you with a question, Stedroy, Roy then has to leave us because obviously the time difference, the clock's changing, which is a UK thing, you know, has kind of affected his schedule a little bit. So Roy, then if you want to say anything, last words, anything, I'm giving you the opportunity, and then we bid you adieu.
Off to get his goat water, that's what it is.
The one that cook on the stone, right?
Right.
I wish I had to go on, yes. But I'm definitely honored to have been a part of this discussion, and I look forward to anything similar going forward, especially strengthening that connection between, I say, those who live here and those who live out there, anywhere out there. And I look forward to building and developing Montserrat going forward. So thanks, nice to meet everybody here.
Likewise, thank you so much as well. Have a good day, and we'll speak again soon, Roy. Then we'll keep you posted, all right? So thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Bye.
Thank you. So back to you, Stedroy. You said a couple things, and the one I want to pick up on is that being intentional about the connections. Now, as you say, you kind of have quite a bit of connections here because of the church thing. You have connections there because obviously you grew up there, spent most of your formative years there and everything. So for you, how can I put it? What are some of the ways you think could really benefit, or things that we can actually do that can help build or make these connections?
You know what? First of all, Chantel, well done for this platform. You know, it's a beautiful thing. It's an amazing thing that you've created here. And I think this is one of the best things and a great way for us to connect and make those connections. So well done to you for that. What Coretta was saying, which was a brilliant idea of connecting different church groups or different cell groups or whatever, you know, especially now in this COVID world where it's all virtual. We're having Zoom church every Sunday, so you have Zoom meetings. So yeah, it's great. It will be great to connect young people or people that way. And then social media, I think is probably one of the biggest ways to connect. So like Doenika was saying, connecting on those pages, you know, like, sorry, pages like 664, Discover Montserrat, MNI Live, you know, all of those other platforms that connect and give information about Montserrat are great ways to meet and connect with Montserratians in an organic way as well, and building on that. And it's just putting yourself out there, you know, join those Facebook groups, join those Instagram, and follow each other on Instagram. You know, you might be worrying about your following or whatever, but still just join and click that follow, and just be, I think if you definitely want to learn more about your culture and want to be connected and embrace that your Montserratian roots and Montserratianness, you know, you have all of these online platforms to definitely help you to connect. And I think as well, like ourselves who are out in the diaspora, you know, maybe reaching out to people in the community there. Like, for instance, I think Dion, who's a fellow actor, she did like some workshops with the kids there and stuff, which is a great thing. And you know, I want to do that in the future, and just connecting, using your skills and your talents, and you know, giving back to your community. Shout out to my brother Omari, who's gonna, you know, launch his foundation next week, the GEM Sports Foundation, which is an amazing thing, giving back to those young athletes in Montserrat who need that assistance. So it's just connecting in that way, and just giving back and doing it being genuine without wanting something back, you know, because I think that's the most gratifying thing, when you know you have given back to your homeland, that's invested in you, and you can see, you know, the growth, or see you change at least one life, you know, maybe reach out to be a mentor. You know, I'm gonna hopefully start doing some mentorships, you know, when it comes to like the arts and the acting and stuff, because that's what I'm involved in. So just definitely use your USP in whatever you are good at, and just reach out. You know, reach out to the different government organizations, reach out to the schools, whichever way you can help and give back. Just do that, and just use your skills. And I think that's a great way of connecting and building up Montserrat at the same time, and investing in the younger generation. Oh my gosh, I'm making myself sound old. I'm not that old.
You're getting there, mate. You're getting there.
You are not that old. But I think, you know, one thing I've heard is, I think my pastor was saying that today, is parents, you know, when you capture your children and instill certain values in them from young, you know, as the Bible says, train up a child in the way you should go and then not depart from it. I think it's the same thing with us as people in the diaspora. So you catch them from young, you nurture those skills, you nurture those talents. And I think a lot of us in this platform, if our talents and our skills were nurtured from a young age, I think we probably would have been further ahead in fulfilling our purpose and our destiny. And so I think those are ways for us to connect and build those connections and help Montserrat.
100%. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to bring Silverine in now. I'm conscious of the time, but one of the things, just piggybacking on what you're saying, is sometimes when I do things, and I have to speak from a personal point of view, I put myself on the other side of the thing. So, you know, and then I kind of think, okay, what would I want? You know, like if I was a young person in Montserrat growing up, I'm thinking, what would I want? What, you know, what opportunities would I want? And therefore, that's why sometimes I can step back and say, oh, let me do this, let me do that. Because it's about giving, as you're saying, those things that if I were in that position that I would want. And I think if more of us kind of think of things like that, you know, because we're in England, America, wherever, and we don't sometimes think back as to, oh, well, if I was still there, what would be some of the things that I would want for myself, or for my, you know, opportunities for my children and so on. So I just wanted to kind of just drop that in there. So I'm going to bring Silverine in, and hopefully we'll still have some time at the end for anybody else who wants to come in, and then we'll pick up on the chat as well, Avril. But I want to bring Silverine in now. So Silverine, over to you, my dear.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Silverine Allen. I am 20 years old, and my mom's Joy Pond from Webbs. Yeah. And my dad is Sylvester Allen from St. John's. Yeah. So I wasn't born in Montserrat. When I say that, everyone gets shocked because I still have the strong dialect. I was born in Antigua. I didn't spend long in Antigua. I was only born in Antigua because Montserrat didn't have the facilities to take, me being born, and to save my mom or save me. So I had to go to Antigua to be born. But I moved to Montserrat, and then I lived in Montserrat for 11 years. And then I moved to the UK. No, I did not want to move to the UK, but I had no choice. So being Montserratian for me, I would often say I'm Shatigan because people will think, oh, because you weren't born in Montserrat, you're not Montserratian, but me could talk the dialect better than you, or I know more about it than you do. So I am Montserratian. I don't know a lot about Antigua, apart from it has 365 beaches and how many rivers, and the hospital I was born in, where I stay. But for Montserrat's home to me, and I try to go back every year. I've been back every year since 2018. And yeah, being Montserratian is very different, because when I moved to the UK, it was like, yeah, this British tongue. And even when I went to school, it was like, oh, you're not British, you have an American accent. I'm like, where you hear American? I don't sound American. But then when I start to talk dialect, it's like, oh, no, you're Jamaican. No, I'm not. I'm Montserratian. Jamaicans say it, we say They say different type of things, and it annoys me because I'm just like, Jamaica's not the only Caribbean island. We're Montserratians. We're small, but we exist. So yeah, that's really it for me. Being Montserratian is different because it's just like, oh, but no one knows about you guys. Are you talking about the what's it in Spain? I'm just like, no, there's an actual Caribbean island called Montserrat, also known as Aliaguana or Emerald of the Caribbean, whichever you know it as. So I really love talking about it because it's like, oh, I don't hear much about Montserrat. Well, I can tell you, I don't mind sitting here and telling you all about my little island of Montserrat. So yeah, that's it really.
That's okay. I love the passion. I love the You made me laugh with that one. So quick question to you, Silverine. You say you try to go back every year. Do you think that you could see yourself living in Montserrat permanently? Because as you said, you didn't want to come, and that's happened to a lot of children because of the crisis. They had to come because obviously your family's come in, and that might not have been their heart and their passion and thing. So would you see yourself living there permanently?
Yeah, I don't really have plans on staying in the UK. Montserrat's home for me, and that's, if I even look at a picture, I get sad because I'm like, oh, I could have been at the beach this Sunday. I could have been down eating my good chicken from the new spot called Bossa Lime. If you haven't been, there's a new spot in Little Bay called Bossa Lime. And, or just, yes, Roy, or just, yeah, it's just like, even though most of my family's up here, growing up in Montserrat, it's just, that's home. So I'm used to Montserrat life, and trying to balance the two it's not easy, but you get used to it, because when you go back to Montserrat, you bring all the stuff up that you can, and then the barrels and everything. So yeah, I would move back to Montserrat.
You would live down there
when I'm stable.
Okay. So here's another
can
question
I
for
just
you.
piggyback off that question,
Go ahead.
Chantel?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the living on Montserrat, you know what? Me personally, I definitely would go back home. But for what I do, I kind of have to be away.
Yeah.
So that's why I do go back often. But I think if I was in another profession, in another career, I probably would have gone back by now and maybe lived a few years there and maybe come back. Who knows? But because of my career at the moment, I'm better off here, trying to expand and make moves. So yeah, like Montserrat is home, man. And yeah, shout out to Bossa Lime. Definitely, if you're in Montserrat, definitely go there. My cousins Tyrone and Nicole, that's their thing. So yeah.
free ad.
100%.
So back to you, Silverine. So in terms of staying connected, you said you tried to go back every year now that you can. What are some of the other ways you stay connected? Because the thing is, not everybody can go back, and what we're trying to do as part of this conversation as well is to learn from other people and understand, well, what do you do to stay connected? So like for me, one of the things I do is I listen to ZJB quite reasonably often, more or less every Saturday if we can. Might not or every week, every day in the week, but definitely every Saturday we'll try to. So that's one of the ways, having it playing in the house, the children are hearing it, they you know, the song them, they know the song them, you know, that kind of thing. So in terms of yourself, other than going back, what are some of the other ways you stay connected?
Social media, that's the biggest one. As I follow 664 Connect, which I think is one of the best Montserrat platforms, as they share the news, jobs, weather, everything. They make you feel like you're in, you can't disconnect from that because they tell you everything. And with other platforms such as Instagram and Twitter, because I've got like the Montserrat flag in my bio, there's a lot of people from Montserrat that follow me. So I'm just like, okay, are you Montserratian? Your parents Montserratian? Because you see people, I don't know, but there's a lot of people out there now that claim little islands as theirs, but they don't really know it. They just see a flag and they're like, yeah, let me stick it in my bio to get more followers. But I'm like, okay, so what's your last name? What's your parents' last name? Where you from? All of that. But I stay connected through social media, and mainly I didn't lose connection with friends. So when I moved up here, I made sure that I had that strong connection with friends. And even when I moved up, I still made more friends through mutual friends. And yeah, that's how I stay connected, apart from going back every year.
Okay. And I'm glad you mentioned social media and things like 664 Connect and so on, because I do feel that they have a really good role to play in terms of giving us the information and things like that. But back to the question that I asked a few others in terms of practical ways we can stay connected. Anybody, this is to all of you now. So, you know, we have, for example, Womb, which is like focus on Montserrat women. Do you think if we had something similar that focused on Montserrat youth? And the thing is, it's not about trying to recreate something if it's already there. Because one of the things I hear about, but I don't know much, so I need to do my research, because obviously I was born in Montserrat, left really young. So a lot of the things I don't know. So Rotaract, like, anybody can shed any light on that? Is that an organization that you think, oh, that's a practical way in which those of us outside can possibly connect? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Anybody wanna, and not just to the guests, anybody in the audience as well, please.
Rotaract and Interact. I think I might be wrong because I myself get confused, but I think Rotaract is for the younger generation and the other one is for like older people. I know people who are in it, and it's a thing in I don't know if it's all Caribbean islands that do it, or I think it's CARICOM. I'm not sure which one, but it's basically that. But to answer your question, I feel like there can be, Greg said it's international, yeah. There can be different ways for us to connect. For example, I don't remember who said it, but the church groups like Stedroy and Duanica going to the same church and being the churches, just like my church, heavily Montserratian are there. So I feel like it can be a way to connect them as well with the youth groups and whatnot. And even with this, I don't know if she knew me, but I didn't know Dominica. So I'm just like, oh, this is another way that you can meet people and socialize and realize that, oh, we are very small, but there's a lot of us out there. So yeah, that's my answer.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Over to you, Avro. Anything in the chat? And if anybody want to comment, I'm giving the floor now.
Just a few comments. A couple of people have agreed with Silverine. Kiretta said, we're small but mighty. Kaylee, I'm assuming that's Mr. Kevin Lee. M&I, boys and girls. Well, if you say that again, Silverine, you won't be wrong. Somebody said chicken and malt. So yeah, thank you.
The chicken have to be in foil paper, by the way, with ketchup. Oh gosh, memories. But I think one of the things I want to say as we're kind of winding down is, you know, this whole connecting, yes, we're focusing on the younger generation, and I did that deliberately, but the same can apply to Montserratians across the board, you know, finding ways in which we can connect with those here and those abroad. And Dee, if you can just put up my the next slide for me so I can just raise a point. So I seen this on social media. I saw it. It was sent to me by a few friends and stuff. And I tell you, when I saw this, the first thing I thought, oh, this can be for young girls here in the UK, in America, in months, you know, wherever, just based on the points that I saw popping out at me. Public speaking. Now, public speaking is, I think, something that's really important. And I thought about pageantry, and I thought that is something that is not just Montserrat, but the Caribbean is a common thing. And I feel like young girls here don't necessarily get the same opportunities. So if I think of, as Stedra said, you go home in Christmas, for example, and loads of events. And one of the ones that I always love to go to is the Princess Show, because I think it just teaches these young girls to have that sense of self-esteem, help them with their confidence, help them with their public speaking, which will then equip them as they go on further. And I just thought, oh, Zoom, COVID has put us into this Zoom climate, and distance now isn't really a thing. We can be anywhere and all be in the same space. Like, look at us, we're here right now. So I think sometimes when we're planning and organizing things and looking at what we can possibly do, whether it's that giving back piece or whatever, it's about thinking, how can I, or how can we, if you're an organization, work across the sea? You know what I mean? We have to start to look at ourselves as a whole community and not just on island and over here, So I just thought I'd just share that, because I know sometimes when you hear other people talk, it spirals off something in your head, and other people get ideas and so on. So I just thought I'd bring that in. Next slide for me, please, Dee.
Chantel,
yes.
Danica has something to say quickly.
Go ahead, yeah, please do.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say, for me, it's just I don't know, like not open question, but I guess my question that I would have to like the Montserratians that obviously live in Montserrat as well is like, what do they want? Like, how do they want to connect with us? Because I feel like, especially coming from Britain or European countries, we're very, we have that European mindset where it's like, what we think about what we want, even if we say that we want to know what they want, we kind of go very British with the way we approach islands, with the way we approach places outside of Europe. So for me, it's always thinking as well, like, what do the young people of Montserrat, and not just like literally all ages, like what do they want? Like, how do they see us, and what value do we have? Like, what are the skills, what are the things that they want to build? Because we can have all these great ideas, but they might want something different, because I guess they know how their culture works, their culture, but I mean our culture. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I do know what you mean. And I think everything always starts with a conversation, because at the end of the day, we're here and we're saying it from our perspectives, because if you've seen one people, different perspectives, we all have these different perspectives. So we've had this platform where we've had this conversation, and I feel like the same needs to happen.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying? And then we're finding ways in which we can make these connections. So for me, I just feel like I'm starting the ball rolling. Yeah. You guys must know me by now. I'm a ball starter. roll it. But yeah, it's about eventually kind of making these connections. And I know other organizations are doing things like that. Other groups are doing things like that. Womb, for example, I know that they're making strides and they have good networks and connections. So they're doing certain things. And quite a few of us in this space, we are associated with Womb in some way, shape or form. So it's about that networking and that conversation. Conversation for me is key to be able to understand, as you rightly say, what do they want? Because we might think, oh, and they'll be like, no, we don't want that, So it's about getting that conversation, but having it with the right people. And that for me is where I'm trying to go with this, as in, we've touched on the churches. Now, Stedroy probably knows some young people that go to church down there. I'm pulling you out, Stedroy, I'm pulling you out. Because you know what? Now that I have your names and your numbers and things, you ain't getting away from me so easy. But what I'm trying to get to, let me stop messing. The point I'm trying to get to is we've started a conversation and we seem to be passionate about it. So then and therefore, we need to keep the fire blazing. It's no point talking and then just stopping. We've got to keep the fire blazing, and that's kind of where I'm trying to go, trying to identify like-minded people who are singing from the same hymn sheet, you understand? And if you find like-minded people who are singing from the same hymn sheet, guess what? You're going to have a good tune. You're going to have a good choir. So that's kind of where I'm trying to go with this, yeah? So 100% get what you're saying. So in terms of what's next for us, because I'm conscious of the time.
Can I just, before you conclude, just to say that I'm sort of like eavesdropping on the young people tonight. I'm the oldie goldie who's here tonight, but all of us share this passion for Montserrat. And I really want to know from the younger people, do you want to have a conversation? Do you want to keep a connection with our generation so that we can feed certain things down to you and then you continue to feed it down? Because the connection is not just between the diaspora and and Montserrat, but it's between generations too. And we need to keep that going, because then the authenticity of what we pass on to each other then is really cemented, because the memories that I have of Plymouth, of Montserrat post 1995, those things are priceless. And so I really want to hear from the younger people, how do you think that we can keep a link between my generation, your generation, and the teenage generation coming up, and all of the different generations?
Very good question. Thank you. Good question.
I think just a response to Auntie Mel's question. I think, I don't know if there's something maybe like a Montserrat association or group within the UK, or something where there are meetings, and you have something like a town hall meeting where you meet up and you voice your things, and you have different activities where you share I don't know, different stories, like Mel was saying, sharing about stuff like from town and how that's impacted their lives and what that means to them as Montserratians, and passing on the different traditions and cultural aspects that's unique to Montserrat. So I think it would be good to maybe have that kind of thing, like a Montserrat UK association or something, where, and I guess it will probably be in different cities, and then we can come together because everyone's scattered. But it will be good, especially, obviously now we have a virtual thing, we can probably do that, have a meeting maybe every 3 months, something of that effect, just to keep the conversation going and learning and sharing the history and just the different aspects of Montserrat from different individuals, young and old, and the older generation passing it down onto us. So I think that's probably a good way of keeping the Montserrat-ness alive and moving.
Agreed. And I think it's, if you guys have heard me talk already, that's one of the things I'm like, the Montserrat associations, I need to know where they are. And if they are there, we need to find ways to I want to use the word infiltrate, but that sounds like I'm going in to try and take over. And that's not the intention, really.
You need to just connect.
Connect. Yeah. Just, find where they are and kind of show that interest that we want to be there. We want that legacy to continue, because it'll be a real shame if the ones that exist die out, and every time with every generation, everything has to start over. That would be a real pity, that would be a real shame. So, I believe we are going to get there, especially now that we're having these conversations, we're raising the awareness, the right people are, potentially hearing the conversations and so on. I do believe we're going to get it, but very good points, Deadroy. Was that somebody else wanted to come in?
Yeah, sorry, Chantel. A podcast would be a good idea, I suppose. Like a monthly podcast of probably the older, not the older generations, but people that know a lot about Montserrat, like Auntie Mel, just a podcast of what the olden days were like, get input from other people, also get the younger generation involved as well. So it's sort of like have what the old Montserrat was like, what the current Montserrat is like, and what the future Montserrat is going to be like going forward. So we sort of like have an idea, bits and drabs of, and also keep explain for like Donika said, she didn't know growing up what the significance of us celebrating St. Patrick's Day was. So sort of like get a behind story of all of that, so people sort of understand culturally why we do certain things in our calendar and stuff like that. And the podcast would be such a really, really good idea.
Yeah, I 100% like that idea. And the thing with things like podcasts, they're around for as long as needed. You know what I mean? Generation after generation, you know, they can listen to these things. So definitely a good idea, 100%. So just to say, in terms of what's next for us as Montserrat Voices, we are going to carry on with this conversation. And as Merle kind of saw where I was going, I'm guessing, that conversation is going to be with a wider group. So it's not just us hearing from the young people, but it's hearing from across the generations in relation to identity, culture, and community, and the importance of that. So that's where we're going to try and go with it next, and hopefully it'll be this side of the year as well, because I'm thinking, you know, I don't know what the plans are for Christmas, but December is like a big significant time for us as well. So if I can try and get that conversation as part of the calendar of events for December, that would be absolutely amazing. So that's kind of where my vision is for what's next. And then following on from the Volcano Stories, we did say we would try and collate some information. We did get some information, but we are appealing for a bit more, please. You know, we would like, you know, any poems that you can contribute, any pictures that you might have, because we don't want to go and sit your permission of pictures that you might have, and any stories. Or if you know anybody that might have these things that might be happy to share with us so we can collate this piece of work, that would be great. You can email us at montserrat.voices@gmail.com. So yeah, so that's what's next from us. So it's just left to say thank you guys very much for your time. I always do appreciate that, the fact that you take the time to be here, give me your 2 hours on a Sunday, a precious Sunday, but I really appreciate it. You know, thank you. Special thank you as well to the guest speakers for agreeing. And I know sometimes people think I know everybody up front. I've now got a good friend called Stenroy. What? But you know, it's amazing. And I just love the way how when I reach out, everybody's just willing and happy to be part of the whole thing.
Anything from
Montserrat. And that's what it is, that love and passion for country. So
let's
keep that fire blazing. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
So, you know, just on the point of us connecting and then the ideas and stuff like that, I think one thing that popped out to me just reading a comment, I think Camille was saying it's just not for culture but survival. I think that's a very important point, because a lot of the times because we're from Montserrat, or we have that Montserrat connection and we move to the UK, we kind of have that unique connection in going through the same things, you know, and it's good to connect when you know, like, someone else is dealing with something that you're dealing with. It kind of eases, like, and makes you feel a bit better. Okay, I'm not the only one who's dealing with this. And also, like, helping other people who may come up and need that help. You know, coming from Montserrat, they may need medicals, or may wanting to settle, and kids wanting to get into school. Like Coretta was saying, her mom used to help, you know, colleges, universities, what the process is of applying, and all of that different things, wanting to get into different careers. Like, we are, as Montserratians, we're all in different areas within the UK, and we're dispersed all over. And it's good for us to come together and have that knowledge and help other people in that way, especially when they're new to the country. And it's hard, like, when you move here for the first time, like, it's not easy. So having that connection and having maybe that association or that Montserrat group that you can go to and say, okay, someone, maybe put it in a forum, I'm you know, help me with this, or who do I go to with this, a bit of signposting. So I do agree with it. It's not only for culture, but a survival thing. And underlying that is our cultural, one of our things in Montserrat, we as Montserratians, we like to help each other. And I think it's a community thing. It's a community thing. And because we're so small, and we know everyone, know each other, know the connections. We've all had that community effect, and it's passed down to how we help people, whether we know them or not. So I think that's a good reason for us to also connect, just to help other people who who definitely will need that help, and we're in that position to help them.
100%. I couldn't even say it better. So I'm not even going to add anything more to that, Roy. Very well said. So thank you everyone again. You know, we ran over a little bit this time, but it was worth the whole thing. So have a good evening, everybody. And until next time, God bless you. All right, take care.
Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Bye, have a good night. God bless.
Night.
Bye.
Bye.
It's wrong to talk real monstration. They say it ain't right grammatically. They can't find them words in no dictionary. Calling it bad language, despising we heritage. But don't care if they call we foolish. This is Montserrat English. Give me the why you are yet there.
That's how I want me to say.
They come up and give me.
That's the Montserratian way.
Come on, sister, fetch me the pot. 1 p.m. and me belly is so. This is Montserrat culture. We'll be proud of it forever.
This is Montserrat culture. We'll be proud of it forever.
What's the use pretending when this language deep within? Me neighbor went New York City, come back trying to talk like Yankee, saying people talking too bad. This thing is driving me mad. But after 2 weeks back in the land, yeah, she cussing, she man. Me say you nah come back in ya.
That's how what the girl say.
Go out to ya, you will on you.
Daddy had to pray you.
You give me something where you say can happen, and you know how me afraid injection. This is Montserrat culture, we'll be proud of it forever.
This is Montserrat culture, we'll be proud of it forever.
Tell me what is wrong with my fellow Montserratians. They pick up everybody language and treating we own just like garbage. They will tell you about backyard and how for you face so hard, but they would die before they declare, I am me born, I am me rare. Stop joke you hand me eye man.
That is straight Montserratian.
Are you look pan me walk here?
That's the Montserratian way.
Happy show walk, hear what happen. You never hear that from no Jamaican. This is Montserrat culture, we'll be proud of it forever.
This is Montserrat culture, we'll be proud of it forever.
English grammar you can't neglect, but hold on to it dialect. Is we ancestors give it to us, so accept the fact and stop making fuss. I am making a strong appeal, regardless what them big shots feel. Use this language more and more. Be proud of your own culture. Mommy, oh, whammy, I hear ya. You know that means surprise. Move from there to story, that mean you're telling lies. When me see you, Michigan, every lead drop, make we back home down. This is Montserrat culture, we'll be proud of it forever.
This is Montserrat culture, we'll be proud of it forever.